Hello everyone, the chill season of 2023 is here, and with its fair share of weapon kits alongside two new specials today, I want to try to rank all of them from worst to best. And at the very end of this video, I'll try to show where I think all these weapons stand in relation to other more established weapons. You guys can let me know if you like that in the comments. With that being said, we got a lot to break down, so let's jump right into it. So I don't think people are going to be surprised as to what the lowest ranked weapon of this season is. It is the Reflux Deco. It is a kit that everyone clowned on Twitter, and for good reason. Reflux is a mobile, short-range weapon in both its fighting and its painting. Giving it a wall that kind of locks it in place and prevents it from dealing with opponents outside of its range is not a great start. Attaching Reef Slider, one of the worst specials in the entire game, to it that has incredibly little synergy with it other than a super situational combo, is also not great. This weapon can cheese zone, and that is really the nicest thing I can say about it. If you want to play Reflux, the vanilla kit exists. The kit is definitely fun, but again, we're ranking things based off how good they are competitively. Unfortunately, this lands at the bottom. Now, while we're jumping up in viability quite a bit here, I'm still a bit disappointed to rank Cella Undercover as the 8th worst. I really thought this would be at least a little bit higher. But I gotta be honest, screen just doesn't really do it for this weapon. I'll talk about the special a lot more when we get to Full Squeezer, but for now I'll say it's definitely not gonna be anything to carry a weapon kit. While Cella Undercover worked well for it in Splatoon 2, part of the reason that worked is ink armor giving it extra HP, which screen does not do. In addition to that, in how main weapon and fighting focused this meta is, a weapon that really struggles with that isn't great. It does have a small combo off of screen, but not a lot of leniency with it, and it still cannot 2-shot plus Brella shield bump for a kill. Even though Torpedo is a nice sub for it and the special is still better than the first kit, which makes this weapon decent, I just don't really see it much in competitive play due to its poor stats. Up next is the Painbrush Novo. The main weapon here isn't really great either. Having a startup before you want to do anything in a fast movement game is a bit of a problem, and the weapon does definitely have some other stats like ink efficiency that are a bit poor. However, when this weapon does get swinging, it has great range, damage, and paint, and with point sensor and 190 missile, it's a solid package. On lockout, the weapon can play for missiles fairly frequently. It's a 190p weapon, so it doesn't take too long to get it, and it's great at playing off its own missiles. Pretty good synergy there. Point sensor's kind of just whatever. It doesn't really do a lot for it other than not being very expensive so you can use it a bit more, but losing out on a fast and medium movement option like the vanilla kit had does hurt quite a lot. I think this is a very niche weapon for things like Flounder and Humpback that are very favored to the brush angles and missiles that we have, but outside of that, I really don't think we'll see too much of it. Up next, the Custom Blaster. I'll start by saying the main and sub is okay. Location is at least something AoE weapons can play off of, but again, not really something that can move enemy players or paint, which means even at 180p, this thing really struggles to get its special triple splashdown. While I talked about the many ways triple splashdown is an upgrade in my previous analysis video, now that we have the special, it's important to talk about the downsides. The super jump splashdown radius is tiny. You don't retain the special when you die. Splashdown in Splatoon 2 dealt 70 damage on a medium hit and 55 on the outside. Now that's reduced to just an outside hit doing 60, losing a crucial 70 damage combo number. And the paint is noticeably worse, so it's not going to be cheesing anything, and it's not going to combo as well with things like end parry, though it's okay with Custom Blaster at least. And most importantly, it's still splashdown. People actually have been able to shoot out both the splashdown and the fist with it. I could already see people in day one getting better at taking out the special and still moving out of the way in time, or even taking down the special and one of the fists in order to live. It does have a lot more situational usefulness, especially since you do have Tacticooler and the ability to line up the fist in different levels of terrain, both from low and high ground, but the amount of nerfs they gave the special means that it's not ending up as much better as I originally thought. And honestly, I feel like a lot of these should be taken away, like the extra 10 frames in the air, for instance. It's definitely not the worst special in the game, but it's not far off either. And that means when Blaster has another kit that works just fine, this one's just kinda there. Well, end parry is a little bit better. The dodge rolls and curling bomb give you a lot more movement options before you splash down, making it a little bit less predictable as a whole. And curling bomb still works pretty well with Dually, on top of Dually of course being a pretty good weapon in its own right, but honestly, notable Dually players aren't really saying a lot about this weapon. The best news I've heard is maybe it being used on some niche maps that are really good for splashdown, but there's just not a whole lot there. Definitely a more solid option I could see working with a more unique playstyle compared to the original, but it seems like the kit just doesn't really have the power to match a suction 190p crab. At number 4, we have the brand new Snip Rider 5B with Splash Wall, Ink Storm, and 210p. Pencil is a pretty solid weapon that I think most people understand at this point with its paint output, long distance pressure, and reliable combos. And this kit is fine. Rain along with the main weapon is pretty good at contesting zone, and Wall lets it play a bit more aggressively. It's just most of the time if you're playing Pencil, the vanilla kit is just a bit better. There are definitely some comps I will see this being used over the original, such as teams who already have a Tacticooler, so it's nice the option is there, but outside of zones, this kit really isn't that much, and even in zones, it has a better one. So while I'd rank it highly, I don't know if we'll be seeing too much of it. Still, it's nice that Pencil players have another strong kit, especially if they're playing with another person with Tacticooler. At number 3 is the brand new S-Blast 91. I talked a lot about this weapon on the second channel, so I'll do my best to keep this a bit more brief, but the burst combos are pretty nice for the weapon. I will say, considering the burst bomb ink efficiency nerfs, you really don't get to use 2 of them that much, if at all. And the burst combo radius to be able to kill is incredibly small, especially against enemies using 1 sub of bomb defense. Really, most of the time I found my burst bomb comboing with someone, it's been when I've hit a burst direct and comboed off of that. That being said, it's still a strong combo on a relatively good main weapon. The long range AoE is still a problem, and its speed up close leaves it susceptible to being rushed down, but burst bomb does help with that. In addition, having Booyah Bomb as an option is really great, and at 190p you can get a decent enough amount of them, especially with Tacticooler on your team. I would say that the overall package here isn't as strong as I thought it might be, but it's definitely enough to work in the right hands, and it's nice to see S-Blast given some actual tools. Maybe if it gets further optimized, I could see it being even higher, but the amount of cooldown you have to deal from frequent use of burst bomb does add up to total downtime over the course of a long game. At number 2 is the Spaton Stand Novo. I mean Neo, but that's the Nuvo sticker, so like what the hell, man? What happened? Are we just gonna ignore this? Is it just gonna be a thing? Let's just talk about the kit. Mist isn't as good as I thought it would be with it. Not that I had that high hopes anyway. It takes up a lot of your ink tank on a 210 crab weapon, so unless if you have last ditch effort, it's not great. It's okay if you really do need to poke people outside of your line of sight, but most of the time you'll be able to hit people with charge slashes anyway. And if people are around and using corners and ledges, you might even just fight up close depending on the situation. Still, it has some usefulness, especially in Rainmaker. Crab though is pretty amazing. Not only can you panic it to combo off of a 70 hit, which is pretty cool, but Crab is of course a very powerful team entry tool that is really nice for this weapon to have. I'd say the only real downside is compared to something like Dooley, you are a lot more vulnerable after the Crab expires since you don't really have any fast option out of it. So you are susceptible to getting punished a bit more than other Crab weapons if you do get it broken. While this kit doesn't keep up with the pace of the original, and therefore I think it's slightly weaker, it has plenty of reasons to be used over it depending on the comp you're using, and is still an incredibly strong main and special combination. However, at number 1 we got arguably an even better main weapon with the Foil Squeezer. The main weapon of Squeezer is one of, if not the best weapons in the entire game, with ridiculous range, no jump RNG, a fast kill time, and overall solid damage. While it does have minor ink efficiency problems, they are pretty small in the grand scheme of things, especially given your sub weapon is now Auto Bomb, a relatively cheap sub that can be great at finding people, something the weapon does actually struggle with, and something you can use a lot more. In addition to that, it can even locate people through the screen. Speaking of which, the screen shaves off 1 shot to kill, which is much more important for this weapon than it was for Undercover Umbrella given its range. And I think we might see some squeezers using Thermal Ink to be able to see through it. Now, I don't think screen is a great special. It's probably still on the weaker half, but it does have some interesting utility and more importantly, synergizes amazing with Squeezer. You can be near it while being able to see through it pretty easily. It gives you cover to be able to move up closer and get the jump on enemies. And if anyone tries to move through the screen, not only do we have the combo I mentioned earlier, but the ability to prevent them from sharking at all, since you can tell if they're in ink, is a huge positive. In general, Squeezer does best when it has more information than the opponent, knowing where it can take fight's position and locating people more easily. Screen does a really good job of giving it that location advantage. It can still block your own teammates' view at times, and it still by no means has the power level of any of the other specials, so a lot of times it can end up not doing that much. But at 190p, you can honestly get way more of them than the Zuka kit would do, and given that the main sub and special have a lot more synergy than the original Squeezer kit, I think this ends up just as good as the original. Honestly, I think we'll be seeing this weapon a lot, since it's way easier to see it more in comps, so we'll have to see what happens with that. But that being said, that's every kit ranked. Here they are relative to some of the other more established weapons. Maybe I'll do a full tier list for this version if you guys want to see it. I think there is a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. Honestly, I've enjoyed the new kits a lot. I hope the new specials get a little bit better, mainly triple splashdown, but there's still enough to definitely be fun. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.